Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back in time, way back, to the frosty fjords and bustling longhouses of the Viking Age to explore a fascinating and often misunderstood topic: what life was really like for Viking women. Boring history for sleep. Forget the horned helmets and the rampaging warriors for a moment. We're going to pull back the curtain on the unsung heroes of Norse society. Imagine yourself waking up in a smoky, bustling longhouse, the smell of wood smoke and simmering stew in the air, knowing your day is about to begin. Sounds like a tough but perhaps adventurous life. Right. Being a Viking woman was indeed foundational to their society, but here's the cheeky reality check: if you were a Viking woman, you probably won't survive this. At least, not without constantly chapped hands, a perpetual smell of wool and smoke, or wishing you had just a few more hours of sleep. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your life as a Viking woman would begin and end in the heart of the home, revolving around a constant, often backbreaking, routine household management, daily chores, food production. Forget relaxing mornings and leisurely afternoons. Your days would be a relentless cycle of practical tasks, ensuring the survival and comfort of your family in a harsh, self-sufficient world. Imagine the dawn breaking over the longhouse. The air, even indoors, would be chilly and filled with the lingering scent of last night's fire. Your first task would be to rekindle the embers, coaxing life back into the hearth, the central hub of your home. This was the core of household management, a role that demanded incredible skill, resilience, and constant effort. You were, in essence, the CEO, COO, and head chef of your entire domestic universe. It's like running a full-scale, off-grid farm and restaurant with no modern appliances and very demanding, often hairy, customers. Your daily chores were extensive and varied. You'd be responsible for preparing meals, which involved grinding grain for bread, churning butter, curing meats, and preparing fish. Imagine spending hours bent over a hand mill, feeling the ache in your arms as you turn grains into flour, or meticulously salting fish to preserve it through the long winter. Cleaning the longhouse, which often housed multiple families, livestock, and a pervasive layer of soot, was a never-ending battle. You'd fetch water from the well or stream, chop firewood, and manage the communal sleeping areas. It's enough to make you wish for a simple dishwasher, or perhaps just a very enthusiastic house elf. A huge part of your responsibility was food production. While men might hunt or fish, women were primarily responsible for processing, preserving, and preparing the vast majority of the family's foodstuffs. This included cheese making, fermenting drinks like ale, drying herbs, and storing root vegetables in cool cellars. Imagine meticulously preparing a huge batch of fermented milk, knowing that your family's winter diet depended on its successful preservation. This wasn't just cooking, it was a complex system of ancient food science, crucial for survival. This pivotal role in household management was not just about survival, it was the foundation of Viking society. A well-managed household meant a prosperous family, and a strong family unit was the bedrock of the community. Your efficiency and diligence directly impacted the health, wealth, and social standing of your kin. One mainstream historical fact that powerfully illustrates this role is the archaeological evidence from Viking Age longhouses, which consistently showed dedicated areas for food preparation, hearths as central features, and numerous domestic tools like quernstones, hand mills, and pottery, affirming the centrality of household activities. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that Viking women would sometimes keep small, specially trained ravens or other birds indoors, not just as pets, but as a rudimentary form of pest control, hoping they would catch mice and insects that threatened food stores. Imagine your anti-bug solution being a tiny, feathered assassin flying around your dining area. It certainly added a unique, wild touch to the domestic scene. Historians still argue whether the extensive demands of household management primarily limited Viking women's opportunities for roles outside the home, keeping them tied to domesticity, or if it instead granted them immense power and authority within their own sphere, making them indispensable pillars of Viking society. Did it restrict them or empower them? Regardless, your life as a Viking woman would be defined by the relentless rhythm of household management, filled with endless daily chores and the critical responsibility of food production. So, your life as a Viking woman would be defined by the relentless rhythm of household management, filled with endless daily chores and the critical responsibility of food production. But beyond the hearth and the pantry, another crucial and incredibly time-consuming task defined your contribution to the family's well-being: textile production, spinning, weaving, clothing creation. Forget fast fashion and ready-to-wear garments. Every thread, every piece of fabric, and every item of clothing in a Viking household was painstakingly made by hand, often by women, making you the essential sartorial backbone of your community. Imagine the long, dark winter evenings in the longhouse. While men might mend tools or tell sagas, your hands would almost certainly be busy with wool. This was the omnipresent reality of textile production, a craft that was not merely a hobby but a fundamental survival skill and a significant economic contribution. You were not just a fashion designer, you were the entire textile industry, from raw material to finished product. It's like running a full-scale garment factory, but your only machinery is a wooden stick and a loom, and all your employees are just you. Your journey would begin with spinning. After the sheep were shorn off in a communal effort, the raw wool needed to be cleaned, carded to untangle and align the fibers, and then spun into yarn using a drop spindle. Imagine the endless hours spent meticulously drawing out fibers and twisting them into a continuous thread, your fingers becoming nimble and calloused from the repetitive motion. This was a skill learned from early childhood, and proficiency meant producing fine, strong yarn. Essential for quality textiles, it's enough to make you wish for a simple electric spinning wheel or perhaps just a very patient, very fluffy sheep that produces pre-spun yarn. Once enough yarn was accumulated, the true artistry began with weaving. Viking women typically used a warp-weighted loom, a large, upright wooden frame where vertical warp threads were held taut by weights, and the horizontal weft threads were passed through using a shuttle. Imagine standing for hours, sometimes days or even weeks, painstakingly interweaving threads to create sturdy cloth for tunics, cloaks, trousers, and sails. The complexity of the patterns and the fineness of the weave reflected a woman's skill and status. Finally came clothing creation. From the woven cloth, you would cut and sew garments for every member of your family, from the swaddling clothes of infants to the durable tunics and cloaks for the men and women. This involved precise measurements, skillful cutting with limited tools, and meticulous hand-stitching with bone or metal needles. Imagine sewing a heavy wool tunic for your husband, ensuring it was warm enough for a sea voyage, knowing that its durability could mean the difference between life and death in a harsh northern climate. This vital role in textile production meant that women were not only providing essential necessities, but also contributing significantly to the household's wealth. As surplus textiles could be traded, your skill at the loom was a direct measure of your value and industriousness within the community. One mainstream historical fact that powerfully illustrates this role is the ubiquitous archaeological finds of spindle whorls, weights used for spinning and loom weights at virtually every Viking Age settlement site, indicating the widespread and constant nature of textile production as a fundamental domestic activity. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some Viking women, particularly those skilled in weaving, would reportedly incorporate tiny, symbolic runic patterns into their cloth. Believing these imbued the garments with protective magic, or brought good fortune to the wearer. Turning every piece of clothing into a subtle charm. Imagine your grandmother sewing a tiny lucky rune into your socks before you leave for school. It certainly added a touch of ancient magic to their practical craft. Historians still argue whether the immense labor involved in textile production primarily constrained Viking women to the domestic sphere, limiting their participation in other aspects of society, or if it instead provided them with a significant economic and social power base within the household and community, making them essential contributors to Viking wealth. Did it bind them to the home, or empower them economically? Regardless, your hands as a Viking woman would be constantly busy with textile production, from the rhythmic motion of spinning to the complex artistry of weaving, culminating in the creation of all your family's clothing. So, your hands as a Viking woman would be constantly busy with textile production, from the rhythmic motion of spinning to the complex artistry of weaving, culminating in the creation of all your family's clothing. But amidst these never-ending chores and crafts, perhaps the most profound and emotionally taxing aspect of your life would be your role as a mother, child-rearing realities, high mortality, constant care. Forget idyllic family scenes. Bringing new life into the Viking world was fraught with peril, demanding immense resilience, unending vigilance, and a profound emotional fortitude in the face of constant loss. Imagine the joyous, yet terrifying, moment of welcoming a new child into the world. This profound experience was immediately overshadowed by the harsh, child-rearing realities of the Viking Age. The survival of your offspring was far from guaranteed, making every day of their early life a testament to both your care and sheer luck. You were not just a parent, you were a frontline caregiver in a battle against disease, accident, and the unforgiving elements. It's like being a modern parent, but without any pediatricians, vaccines, or even a basic understanding of germ theory. And every cough sounds like a death knell. The most heartbreaking reality was the high mortality rate among infants and young children. Diseases that are easily treatable today, like measles, diphtheria, or even common colds, could sweep through a longhouse with devastating effect. Poor sanitation. Limited medical knowledge. Remember that primitive medicine from our medieval warrior script. And cold. Damp living conditions made children particularly vulnerable. Imagine burying more than one of your own children, each tiny life extinguished before it had truly begun. Feeling the gut-wrenching grief that was a tragically common experience for mothers of the era? It's enough to make you wish for a simple bottle of antiseptic, or perhaps just a very warm, very clean, very child-proof house. Despite the ever-present threat of loss, your daily life would be consumed by constant care for your surviving children. From infancy, you would nurse them, swaddle them, and keep them warm and fed. As they grew, you would teach them essential skills, the girls learning domestic crafts like spinning and weaving just like you, and the boys learning about farming, hunting, and later, perhaps warfare. Imagine spending your days with your children perpetually at your side, teaching them by example, guiding their small hands through chores, and constantly protecting them from the myriad dangers of their environment. Whether it was a sharp tool or a winter chill, beyond physical care, you were also responsible for their moral and social upbringing, instilling in them the values of honor, courage, and loyalty that were so central to Viking society. Your influence on their character and their ability to integrate into the community was immense. This intense, often heartbreaking, reality of child-rearing meant that Viking women developed an extraordinary resilience and a profound, if stoic, love for their offspring, cherishing every moment of their short, precious lives. One mainstream historical fact that powerfully illustrates these child-rearing realities is the demographic data from skeletal remains unearthed at Viking-age burial sites, which consistently show a disproportionately high number of infant and child graves, confirming the severe rates of childhood mortality during that period. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that Viking mothers would sometimes attach small, tinkling bells or charms made of bone or metal to their infants' clothing or cradle boards, not just for decoration, but with the practical purpose of being able to hear their babies if they stirred or cried. Even while busy with other chores in a busy, noisy longhouse, imagine your baby's outfit coming with built-in jingle bells, just so you didn't accidentally lose them in the clutter. It certainly highlights the constant vigilance required. Historians still argue whether the high child mortality rates primarily led to a stoic acceptance of loss among Viking women, fostering emotional resilience, or if it instead prompted a greater emphasis on communal child-rearing and family networks. Ensuring more hands were available for constant care, did it harden them, or just make them more communal? Regardless, your role as a Viking woman meant facing the stark child-rearing realities, enduring heartbreaking high mortality, and dedicating yourself to constant care amidst a perilous world. So, your role as a Viking woman meant facing the stark child-rearing realities, enduring heartbreaking high mortality, and dedicating yourself to constant care amidst a perilous world. But even with all these domestic duties, your standing in Viking society was far from that of a mere domestic servant. You possess surprising autonomy and influence. Due to legal rights property, divorce, public standing, forget being chattel or having no voice. Viking women held a unique and remarkably strong legal position compared to many other societies of the era, granting them significant power within their household and community. Imagine the freedom to own your own belongings, even after marriage. This was a core aspect of your legal rights as a Viking woman. Unlike in many other contemporary cultures, where a woman's property often automatically transferred to her husband upon marriage, Viking law recognized a married woman's right to control her own assets, providing a remarkable degree of economic independence. You were not just a wife, you were an economic agent with distinct legal protections. It's like being in a modern partnership where you both have separate bank accounts, but your partner also occasionally goes raiding. Central to these rights was your ability to own and inherit property. This could include land, livestock, jewelry, household goods, and even enslaved people. You could manage this property, enter into contracts, and even conduct business in your own name. Imagine inheriting a valuable piece of land from your father, or accumulating a hoard of silver arm rings through your textile production. Remember that, and knowing that it was legally yours, even if your husband was off raiding in foreign lands. This economic power was a significant source of your influence. Perhaps even more striking was your right to divorce. While not as common or easy as a modern divorce, Viking law allowed both men and women to initiate divorce for various reasons, including cruelty, spousal abuse, or even a husband's impotency or inability to provide for the family. Imagine being able to walk away from a bad marriage, taking your dowry and property with you, simply by declaring your intent before witnesses. This legal recourse, though challenging to exercise, offered a powerful safeguard against severe marital unhappiness, beyond personal and economic rights. Viking women also possessed a considerable degree of public standing. They could host feasts, manage large estates in their husband's absence, often for years during long voyages, and wield considerable social influence within the community. While they generally couldn't serve in political assemblies or lead armies, their voice in household matters and community decisions, especially regarding disputes or alliances, was often highly respected. Imagine being the primary decision-maker for your entire farm and extended family while your husband is away, effectively running a small economic empire. These extensive legal rights provided Viking women with a level of agency and respect that was notably progressive for their time, empowering them within their patriarchal society and often making them formidable figures in their own right. One mainstream historical fact that powerfully illustrates these legal rights is the detailed accounts in Icelandic sagas and legal codes like the Grágás Grey Goose Laws, which provides specific examples of women owning land, initiating divorce, and participating in legal proceedings, confirming their distinct legal status. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that Viking women, when initiating a divorce, would sometimes perform a symbolic act of disavowal in public, such as cutting the ties on their shoes and declaring themselves divorced before witnesses. Making the separation dramatically visible to the community, imagine ending your marriage by publicly untying your shoelaces. It certainly made a statement. Historians still argue whether the legal rights of Viking women primarily indicate a truly egalitarian society where gender roles were more fluid, or if these rights were more practical necessities in a society where men were frequently absent, allowing women to maintain societal functions out of sheer practicality. Did it show gender equality, or just pragmatic necessity? Regardless, your status as a Viking woman was notably strong, endowed with significant legal rights, including control over property, the ability to seek divorce, and a respected public standing. So, your status as a Viking woman was notably strong, endowed with significant legal rights, including control over property, the ability to seek divorce, and a respected public standing. But while you had personal agency, your entry into womanhood, and often your family's future, would be largely determined by carefully calculated agreements, marriage customs arranged unions, bride wealth, power. Forget romantic love matches and spontaneous proposals. Viking marriages were complex social and economic contracts designed to forge alliances, secure property, and consolidate influence, making your union a strategic move for your entire kin. Imagine the discussions taking place between families, long before you even thought of a partner. This was the intricate reality of marriage customs. Viking marriages were rarely, if ever, based purely on individual affection. They were primarily pragmatic alliances, negotiated between families to strengthen social ties, pool resources, and secure advantageous relationships within the community or even across different settlements. You were not just a bride, you were a crucial piece in a larger family strategy. It's like being a chess piece on a very large, very complicated board, but the entire family fortune is riding on your move. Most unions were arranged unions. While your consent might sometimes be sought, especially as a high-status woman, the ultimate decision rested with your father or male guardian. The selection of a spouse involved careful consideration of their family's wealth, reputation, political connections, and strength. Imagine learning that your future husband had been chosen for you, not because of your feelings, but because his family owned a prime piece of farmland or controlled a vital trade route. It's enough to make you wish for a simple dating app, where your biggest concern is just a bad profile picture. A crucial component of these arrangements was the bride wealth or munder. This was a payment or gift from the groom's family to the bride's family, signifying the groom's ability to support his wife and acting as compensation for the loss of her labor and offspring. It also served as a guarantee for the bride's security. In return, the bride's family often provided a dowry heimaforgjöf, which would remain her personal property throughout the marriage. Remember your property rights. Imagine your future husband's family paying a substantial sum to yours, making your marriage a significant economic transaction as well as a social one. This wasn't just a wedding, it was a merger and acquisition. These marriage negotiations were about more than just wealth. They were about power. A well-chosen marriage could elevate a family's standing, solidify political influence, and even end long-standing feuds. For you, the bride, it meant moving into a new household, often with a new set of responsibilities and a new family dynamic to navigate. Your ability to integrate and bear healthy children was crucial for the success of the alliance. These complex marriage customs highlight the deep interconnectedness of family, economy, and social structure in Viking society, where individual desires often took a backseat to the collective interests of the kin group. One mainstream historical fact that powerfully illustrates these marriage customs is the detailed descriptions of marriage negotiations, bride wealth payments, and dowry arrangements found in Icelandic sagas and early Norse law codes, which outline the legal and social framework surrounding unions. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that in some Viking Age marriage ceremonies, a symbolic exchange of swords or rings would occur between the bride and groom, with the groom sometimes giving the bride a key to his household, signifying her authority as the mistress of the home. Imagine receiving a literal key to the house on your wedding day. Not just a figurative one, it certainly symbolized her domestic power. Historians still argue whether the prevalence of arranged marriages primarily limited women's individual freedom and autonomy by binding them to familial strategies, or if it instead provided a degree of stability and security in a harsh world, often leading to strong partnerships and advantageous family alliances. Did it restrict women or protect them? Regardless, your path into adulthood as a Viking woman was intricately woven with complex marriage customs, involving strategic arranged unions, the significant transfer of bride wealth, and the careful calculation of power. So, your path into adulthood as a Viking woman was intricately woven with complex marriage customs, involving strategic arranged unions, the significant transfer of bride wealth, and the careful calculation of power. But even after your marriage was settled, your days would be far from idle, as your indispensable role extended directly to the land that sustained your family farm work animals. Fields. Sustaining the family. Forget delicate sensibilities and purely indoor pursuits. Viking women were active, essential partners in the grueling agricultural cycle, ensuring the survival and prosperity of their households through direct labor. Imagine the crisp, cold air of a Scandinavian morning as you step out of the longhouse. Your hands would quickly find work, not just with domestic chores, but with the demanding reality of farm work. Viking society was fundamentally agrarian, and the success of your farm was paramount for your family's survival, especially during the long, harsh winters. You were not just a homemaker, you were a farmer, shepherd, and agricultural manager, often doing as much physical labor as the men. It's like running a self-sufficient organic farm today, but with significantly less machinery and significantly more mud. A huge part of your daily routine revolved around animals. You'd be responsible for milking cows and goats, often twice a day, regardless of the weather. You'd gather eggs from chickens, care for young lambs and calves, and help with the shearing of sheep. Remember that wool for your textile production? Feeding, watering, and mucking out the animal pens would be a constant chore, particularly in the colder months when livestock often shared the longhouse for warmth. Which, let's be honest, added a certain aroma to the living space. Imagine coaxing milk from a stubborn cow in the dim light of dawn, your fingers numb with cold, knowing that this milk was vital for your family's breakfast and for making cheese. It's enough to make you wish for a simple alarm clock that doesn't move. Beyond the livestock, you would actively participate in the fields, while men often handled the heaviest plowing. Women were typically involved in sowing seeds, weeding crops, and harvesting grain and vegetables. You'd spend long hours bent over in the open air, regardless of sun, rain, or biting winds, ensuring a good yield for the coming year. Imagine the satisfaction of seeing rows of barley sprouting, or the ache in your back after a full day of harvesting root vegetables, knowing that every single plant contributed to your family's winter stores. This wasn't just gardening, it was direct sustenance, directly tied to your family's survival. Your labor was critical for sustaining the family. The food you helped produce, the milk, the cheese, the vegetables, the meat, all were direct results of your efforts in the farmyard and fields. This deep involvement in the agricultural cycle gave you a tangible, undeniable value within your household and community, far beyond any societal expectations. This extensive farm work demonstrates the practical, often physically demanding, nature of a Viking woman's life, highlighting her indispensable contribution to the economic bedrock of her family and the entire settlement. One mainstream historical fact that powerfully illustrates these roles is the archaeological evidence from Viking Age farms, showing tools like scythes, hoes, and animal enclosures alongside domestic implements, and historical texts indicating women's significant role in dairying and crop cultivation in Norse societies. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that Viking women, while working in the fields or with animals, would sometimes wear small, elaborately carved amulets depicting fertility goddesses or symbols, not just for religious devotion, but as a practical hope for bountiful harvests and healthy livestock. Essentially a charm for good agricultural yields. Imagine wearing a lucky charm to help your crops grow. It certainly shows their deep connection to the land and its productivity. Historians still argue whether women's extensive participation in farm work primarily reinforced traditional gender roles by keeping them tied to agricultural labor, or if it instead granted them significant practical skills and economic leverage within the household, making them indispensable partners in survival and prosperity. Did it limit them or empower them regardless? Your hands as a Viking woman were deeply connected to farm work, nurturing animals, tending fields, and directly sustaining the family through tireless effort. So, your hands as a Viking woman were deeply connected to farm work, nurturing animals, tending fields, and directly sustaining the family through tireless effort. But your economic contributions weren't confined solely to the farm and longhouse. Some Viking women, particularly those with ambition or opportunity, extended their influence into broader spheres, trade and commerce markets. Bartering, economic influence. Forget being isolated in your rural home for many. Engaging in various forms of exchange was a vital part of life, giving them a surprising degree of economic power and a window to the wider world. Imagine walking into a bustling Viking Age market, the air thick with the smell of smoked fish, tanned leather, and foreign spices. This was a realm where Viking women often played a significant role, engaging in trade and commerce, while men might handle large-scale international voyages. Local and regional trade was frequently the domain of women, leveraging their household surpluses and artisanal skills. You were not just a producer, you could be a merchant, a shrewd negotiator, and a key node in the local economy. It's like running a pop-up shop at a farmer's market today, but your currency might be a silver arm ring and your customers might be carrying axes. You would bring goods from your household and farm to local markets. These could include textiles you painstakingly wove. Remember all that spinning and weaving. Dairy products you produced. Remember the milking, cured meats, furs, or even finely crafted tools and jewelry. Imagine carefully displaying your best woolen cloaks or freshly made cheeses, haggling over prices, and exchanging goods for silver, amber, or other necessities not produced on your farm. This was direct economic engagement, providing vital goods for the community and income for your family. Much of this exchange happened through bartering, while silver coinage and hack silver cut pieces of silver used as currency existed. Direct exchange of goods and services was still very common. Your ability to assess the value of different items, to negotiate fairly, and to build trust with other traders was crucial for successful transactions. Imagine trading a few yards of your finest linen for a newly forged iron axe, carefully weighing the quality of both items to ensure a fair deal. This wasn't just shopping, it was a constant test of your economic savvy. This involvement in economic influence sometimes extended beyond local markets. Evidence suggests some Viking women traveled on trading expeditions, managed trading posts, or even oversaw substantial mercantile operations, particularly widows or women from wealthy families. Their presence in trading centers like Birka or Hedeby indicates a more outward-looking role than often assumed. Imagine managing a small warehouse filled with furs and amber, negotiating with foreign merchants who spoke different languages, and overseeing the shipment of goods to distant lands. This active participation in trade and commerce provided Viking women with a powerful avenue for economic independence and social standing, contributing directly to the wealth of their families and the broader Viking economy, often making them figures of considerable influence One mainstream historical fact that powerfully illustrates this role is the archaeological evidence of female graves containing sets of weighing scales and weights in Viking Age trading towns like Birka, Sweden, indicating their direct involvement in mercantile activities and commerce. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that Viking women engaged in trade would sometimes carry a small, personal set of runic dice, not just for games, but also for fortune telling to assess the luck of a potential trade deal or whether a journey would be profitable. Blending superstition with economic pragmatism. Imagine rolling dice to decide if you should buy that shipment of walrus ivory. It certainly added a touch of fate to their business decisions. Historians still argue whether women's involvement in trade and commerce primarily emerged from practical necessity, filling roles when men were away raiding, or if it indicates a more inherent cultural acceptance of female entrepreneurship and economic agency in Viking society. Did it just fill a gap? Or was it a sign of true equality regardless? Your life as a Viking woman could involve active participation in trade and commerce, frequenting markets, engaging in shrewd bartering, and wielding significant economic influence. So, your life as a Viking woman could involve active participation in trade and commerce, frequenting markets, engaging in shrewd bartering, and wielding significant economic influence. But beyond the mundane yet vital tasks of daily life and the pursuit of earthly wealth, the spiritual realm also offered powerful, and sometimes terrifying, avenues for female influence religious roles. Seers, priestesses, spiritual power. Forget passive worship and peripheral involvement. Viking women could ascend to positions of profound spiritual authority, connecting with the gods and influencing their communities through prophecy, ritual, and ancient wisdom. Imagine the eerie silence in the longhouse, broken only by the rhythmic chanting of a woman in trance. This could be your calling, a powerful and respected religious role in Norse paganism. Women often held significant positions as intermediaries between the human and divine worlds. You were not just a worshiper, you could be a conduit for divine will, a guardian of ancient traditions, and a source of spiritual guidance. It's like being a religious leader, a therapist, and a fortune teller all rolled into one. But your therapy involves communicating with gods, and your predictions might involve the end of the world. A particularly powerful role was that of the seers, or volur. These women were revered and sometimes feared for their ability to practice seder, a form of Norse magic involving divination, prophecy, and influencing events. They would often travel between communities, performing rituals and offering glimpses into the future. Imagine a community coming to you, desperate for answers, and you, with your staff and ritual garb, entering a trance-like state to commune with spirits and reveal what is to come. This was a position of immense spiritual power, often accompanied by social prestige, but also a degree of otherworldliness that could be isolating. Beyond individual seers, women also served as priestesses Gaijur or Blotgajur, overseeing sacrifices blots, leading rituals, and maintaining the sacred spaces dedicated to the gods. They would interpret omens, though perhaps not as obsessively as our Roman emperors. Remember them, conduct ceremonies, and guide their communities in matters of faith. Imagine presiding over a solemn offering to Odin or Freya, ensuring every detail of the ritual was perfect, knowing that the community's harvest or victory in battle might depend on the god's favor. It's enough to make you wish for a simple role just cleaning the temple, not running the entire spiritual show. This direct access to and wielding of spiritual power granted Viking women a unique form of authority. Their pronouncements could influence political decisions, military campaigns, and even individual fates. They held knowledge of ancient myths, powerful spells, and the intricate workings of the cosmos, making them indispensable figures in a world deeply intertwined with the supernatural. This significant involvement in religious roles highlights a profound respect for female spiritual authority in Viking society. allowing women to exert influence far beyond the domestic sphere and engage directly with the very forces believed to shape their world. One mainstream historical fact that powerfully illustrates these religious roles is the archaeological discovery of vulva graves, containing staffs, special grave goods, and often prestigious items that indicate a woman of significant religious authority. Like the Firkat burial in Denmark or the Cirrus of Birka grave, a particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some Viking seeresses would reportedly consume hallucinogenic plants or fungi to help induce their trance states, allowing them to better commune with spirits and gain prophetic visions, making their spiritual journeys quite literal and chemically aided. Imagine your spiritual guidance coming from someone who just ate some questionable mushrooms. It certainly adds a wild dimension to their spiritual practices. Historians still argue whether the prominent religious roles of Viking women primarily served to reinforce existing patriarchal structures by channeling female influence into ritualistic rather than political power, or if it genuinely offered a unique avenue for female autonomy and leadership within a deeply spiritual society. Did it contain their power, or truly empower them? Regardless, your life as a Viking woman could lead to profound religious roles, transforming you into a revered seer or priestess, wielding immense spiritual power within your community. So, your life as a Viking woman could lead to profound religious roles, transforming you into a revered seer or priestess, wielding immense spiritual power within your community. But beyond the quiet wisdom of prophecy and the solemnity of ritual, there's a more famous, often sensationalized, aspect of Viking women's capabilities. Saga figures shield maidens, sorceresses, legends. Forget meek maidens and damsels in distress. The sagas and archaeological finds hint at women who defied traditional gender roles, inspiring awe, fear, and enduring tales of martial prowess and magical might. Imagine hearing tales around the hearth on a long winter's night. Tales of women who fought alongside men, wielded magic, or commanded respect with their sharp wits. These were the captivating saga figures that populated the oral traditions and later, the written narratives of the Viking Age, while often exaggerated for dramatic effect. These stories reflect a cultural appreciation for strong, capable women who sometimes stepped outside conventional roles. You were not just a domestic manager or a spiritual guide. You could be the inspiration for epic poetry, a warrior whose name echoed through the halls. It's like being a character in a fantasy novel, but your life is actually tangibly inspiring real-life legends. The most iconic of these figures were the shield maidens. These were women described in sagas who chose to fight as warriors, taking up arms alongside men. While direct archaeological evidence for widespread female warriors is debated, some burials with weapons alongside female skeletons suggest at least some women did engage in combat. Imagine strapping on armor, feeling the weight of a sword in your hand, and charging into battle alongside your male kin, defying expectations and earning renown for your bravery. This wasn't a common path, but the very existence of these stories shows that it was a recognized, even admired, possibility. It's enough to make you wish for a simple life where your biggest fight is just convincing your kids to eat their vegetables. Not a full-blown axe battle. Then there were the sorceresses. Women who wielded powerful magic beyond the more formal satyr of the velour. Remember them. These figures in the sagas could cast curses, shapeshift, or bring about great misfortune, often portrayed with a dark, dangerous power. While this might be dramatic embellishment, it speaks to the cultural understanding of female agency in the mystical realm. Imagine being feared and respected for your ability to conjure powerful spells, your reputation preceding you in every village you entered. This wasn't just about making predictions, it was about bending reality to your will. Or so the stories went. These legends of powerful women, whether as warriors or magic wielders, played a crucial role in shaping the identity of Viking society. They provided role models of female strength, independence, and the ability to defy societal norms, even if only a few real women lived up to the full mythical portrayals. These captivating saga figures highlight the diverse and powerful representations of women in Viking culture, demonstrating that their capabilities and potential extended far beyond rigid domestic confines. Even if their true historical prevalence in such extreme roles remains a subject of debate, one mainstream historical fact that powerfully illustrates these figures is the discovery of the BJ 581 warrior grave at Birka, Sweden, which, following DNA analysis in 2017, confirmed that the high-status warrior buried with weapons, horses, and a gaming board was, in fact, a biological female, sparking renewed debate about the historical reality of Viking shield maidens. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some Viking women in the sagas, when they were particularly formidable, would reportedly be given terrifying, masculine-sounding nicknames like Thornheart or Axebelly, implying their exceptional toughness and martial prowess, almost as a way to acknowledge they transcended typical gendered expectations. Imagine being called Sledgehammer Susan by your friends because you're so tough. It certainly shows the unique way their society recognized extreme female strength. Historians still argue whether the prevalence of shield maidens and powerful sorceresses in sagas primarily reflects a genuine historical reality of widespread female warriors and magic users, or if these were more idealized. Mythical archetypes designed to entertain and reinforce certain cultural values rather than literal common occurrences. Did they exist everywhere, or just in stories? Regardless, your life as a Viking woman was touched by the inspiring and sometimes terrifying tales of saga figures, from fierce shield maidens to enigmatic sorceresses, becoming part of enduring legends. So, your life as a Viking woman was touched by the inspiring and sometimes terrifying tales of saga figures, from fierce shield maidens to enigmatic sorceresses, becoming part of enduring legends, but amidst the grand narratives of heroism and magic. The daily reality of your physical well-being was a constant struggle: health and hygiene herbal remedies, childbirth risks. Forget modern medicine and sterile environments. Maintaining health in the Viking Age was a challenging, often dangerous, endeavor, demanding practical knowledge and immense resilience in the face of widespread ailments and life-threatening events. Imagine the persistent aches from hard labor, the sting of cuts, or the warmth of a fever. This was the constant reality of health and hygiene in the Viking Age. While Norse people had a pragmatic approach to cleanliness for their time, they lacked the scientific understanding of disease, making every minor ailment a potential threat and major events like childbirth incredibly perilous. You were not just a person living your life. You were also a constant patient in a world without antibiotics or pain medication. It's like living in a permanent, low-level flu season. But every cough could escalate into something truly terrifying. When illness or injury struck, you would turn to herbal remedies. Viking women, drawing on generations of accumulated knowledge, were often the primary healers within their households and communities. They understood the properties of local plants, barks, and berries, using them to create poultices for wounds, infusions for fevers, or teas for digestive issues. Imagine gathering specific herbs from the forest, carefully drying them, and then concocting a bitter brew for a sick child, hoping that the ancient wisdom passed down through your family would be enough to cure them. This wasn't just folk medicine, it was often the only medicine available, and its efficacy was entirely hit or miss. However, the most significant and terrifying childbirth risks overshadowed a woman's life. Childbirth was by far the leading cause of death for Viking women. Without sterile instruments, modern understanding of infection, or pain relief, both mother and infant were in extreme peril during labor. Complications like hemorrhaging, infection, or a difficult birth could swiftly turn joy into tragedy. Imagine going through labor in a dimly lit longhouse, surrounded by other women, knowing that this might be the last time you saw your family, and feeling every agonizing moment of pain, with no relief in sight. It's enough to make you consider joining a male raiding party, just for a quicker, less painful way out beyond these major events. Daily hygiene was a constant effort. While Vikings were known for being relatively clean compared to some contemporaries, they did enjoy their regular baths. Even in cold water, maintaining true cleanliness in a smoky longhouse with animals, remember those was a challenge. Vermin were common, and simple cuts or scrapes could quickly become infected. This constant battle for health and hygiene highlights the fragility of life in the Viking Age and the profound resilience required by women, who not only faced these risks themselves, but also bore the primary responsibility for the health of their entire household. One mainstream historical fact that powerfully illustrates these health realities is the analysis of Viking Age skeletal remains, which frequently show evidence of healed fractures, dental problems, and signs of chronic infections, alongside archaeological finds of implements like tweezers, ear spoons, and soap-like substances, indicating an effort towards personal care despite the limitations. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some Viking women, to combat bad breath or soothe toothaches, would reportedly chew on small pieces of willow bark which contains salicin, a natural pain reliever akin to aspirin, or use a kind of primitive chewing gum made from birch tar, essentially their version of ancient breath mints and painkillers. Imagine your morning routine involving a mouthful of tree sap. It certainly highlights their ingenuity in the face of discomfort. Historians still argue whether the prevalent health risks and limitations of primitive medicine primarily fostered a reliance on communal support and spiritual remedies, or if it instead spurred a pragmatic, observational understanding of the human body and medicinal plants that laid groundwork for later medical advances. Did it make them more communal, or just better herbalists regardless? Your life as a Viking woman was a constant negotiation with health and hygiene, relying on precious herbal remedies, and facing the terrifying reality of significant childbirth risks. So, your life as a Viking woman was a constant negotiation with health and hygiene, relying on precious herbal remedies, and facing the terrifying reality of significant childbirth risks. But even with all the demanding domestic duties, the farm work, and the health challenges, your hands would also be instrumental in creating beauty and functionality, adding artistic flair to the necessities of life craftsmanship, jewelry, pottery, domestic production. Forget mass-produced goods and anonymous artisans. Viking women were often skilled craftswomen, imbuing everyday objects with artistry and producing valuable items that were both practical and beautiful, contributing significantly to the household's wealth and aesthetics. Imagine the quiet satisfaction of shaping clay or meticulously working with fine silver wire. This was the rewarding reality of craftsmanship, while men often worked with wood, iron, and shipbuilding. Women were the primary creators of many household items and personal adornments, transforming raw materials into objects of utility and beauty. You were not just a consumer of goods, you were a maker, an artist, and a vital contributor to the material culture of your community. It's like being a DIY enthusiast and a professional artist rolled into one. But your art supplies are whatever you can find in nature, and your finished products are essential for survival. A particularly visible aspect of your skill would be in jewelry. Viking women loved adornment, and many pieces, from intricate brooches often used to fasten clothing. Remember those layers of textiles to beads, necklaces, and arm rings were made by skilled female hands. Imagine meticulously shaping a piece of bronze into a beautiful brooch, incising it with swirling patterns, or threading colorful glass beads into a necklace. These weren't just decorative, they were often status symbols, indicators of wealth, and even legal tender. Remember hack silver. The more elaborate your jewelry, the more prestige you might have had. It's enough to make you wish for a simple craft store, or perhaps just a very steady hand. Beyond personal adornment, your hands would shape pottery, clay pots, bowls, and storage vessels were essential for cooking. Remember all that food production and storage in every longhouse. While simpler, everyday pottery might be functional, You could also create more elaborate, decorated pieces for special occasions or trade. Imagine kneading the raw clay, shaping it on a simple wheel or by hand, and then firing it in a pit kiln, hoping it wouldn't crack, knowing it would hold your family's vital food stores. And generally, all of this contributed to broader domestic production. This included a wide array of items beyond just textiles, though textiles were huge. You might be involved in preparing animal hides for leather goods, making bone combs, or even crafting small wooden implements for household use. Every item created within the home reduced the need to trade for it, contributing directly to the family's self-sufficiency and wealth. This pervasive craftsmanship highlights the industrious nature of Viking women, whose skills contributed not only to the functionality and comfort of their households, but also to the rich artistic heritage of the Viking Age, making them invaluable members of their society. One mainstream historical fact that powerfully illustrates these crafts is the archaeological discovery of numerous finely crafted personal ornaments, combs, and pottery in female Viking Age burials and settlement sites, often showing high levels of artistic skill and demonstrating women's direct involvement in their creation. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some Viking women, when working on particularly intricate pieces of jewelry or delicate weaving, would reportedly use small, carefully crafted bone or antler picks or needles that were barely thicker than a hair, allowing them to achieve incredibly fine details in their work, almost like ancient micro-tools. Imagine needing a magnifying glass just to see the tip of your crafting tool. It certainly highlights the precision and patience required for their artistry. Historians still argue whether the focus on craftsmanship among Viking women primarily reinforced their domestic roles, keeping their skills within the household sphere, or if it instead provided an important avenue for creative expression and economic independence. Allowing them to trade valuable goods and gain individual renown for their artistry, did it limit their horizons or expand them? Regardless, your hands as a Viking woman were adept at craftsmanship, creating beautiful jewelry, functional pottery, and a wide range of essential domestic production. So, your hands as a Viking woman were adept at craftsmanship, creating beautiful jewelry, functional pottery, and a wide range of essential domestic production. But beyond your practical skills and economic contributions, your very essence, your character, your demeanor, and your connections played a crucial role in determining your standing within the tightly knit Norse communities. Social status, honor, reputation, community respect. Forget rigid hierarchies based solely on wealth or lineage. In Viking society, a woman's influence was heavily shaped by her personal conduct, the esteem of her peers, and the collective memory of her kin's achievements, making her social standing a carefully cultivated and fiercely protected asset. Imagine walking into a communal gathering, feeling the subtle nods of approval or the cold stares of disapproval. This was the ever-present reality of social status. In Viking society, while men might gain fame through raiding and warfare, a woman's standing was largely built upon her management of the household. Her skill in crafts, remember that beautiful jewelry you made, her ability to raise capable children despite the high mortality. Remember that, and perhaps most importantly, her adherence to deeply ingrained social codes. You were not just an individual, you were a living embodiment of your family's dignity, and your behavior reflected directly on their name. It's like living in a small town where everyone knows everyone, but every single one of your actions contributes to a constantly updated public report card. Central to your social standing was Honor Hill. This wasn't just about avoiding shame, it was about upholding a reputation for integrity, courage, and competence. A woman of honor managed her household efficiently, raised her children well, showed hospitality to guests, and spoke her mind with wisdom and directness. Imagine speaking up at a family council, your words carrying weight because your reputation for good judgment and unwavering resolve was widely known. Conversely, bringing shame upon your family through misconduct or weakness could have severe social repercussions. Your reputation was a delicate thing, easily tarnished but hard-won. It was built through years of consistent good behavior, skillful management, and effective networking within the community. Gossip and rumor, though unofficial, could be devastating to a woman's standing. Imagine a whisper circulating about your household's alleged laziness or your questionable choices. Knowing that such a rumor, even if untrue, could undermine years of effort to build a good name. It's enough to make you wish for the anonymity of a large city, or perhaps just a very effective rumor squashing spell. Ultimately, all of this contributed to community respect. A woman who was seen as capable, honorable, and wise would command significant influence. Even if she held no formal political office, her advice would be sought, her opinions valued, and her presence at gatherings would add gravitas. She might act as a mediator in disputes, a trusted advisor in family matters, or even a leader in local events. Imagine being the go-to person in your village for advice on everything from a difficult birth to a contentious land dispute. Your wisdom earning you the deference of both men and women. This intricate web of social status meant that Viking women, despite living in a patriarchal society, possessed substantial informal power and influence, earned not through brute force, but through their personal virtues, skills, and the collective esteem of their community. One mainstream historical fact that powerfully illustrates this social status is the prominent portrayal of strong, influential women in Icelandic sagas, such as Aud the Deep-Minded or Gudrid Thorbjarnardóttir, who, while fictionalized, embody the respected and often powerful social roles Viking women could achieve. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that Viking women, particularly those of high status, would sometimes be buried with small, intricately carved keys as grave goods, symbolizing their authority as the husfreyja or mistress of the household, a tangible representation of their domestic power and respected social position. Imagine your legacy being remembered by a single, beautiful key. It certainly highlights the significance of their household management. Historians still argue whether the emphasis on honor and reputation for Viking women primarily served to enforce strict societal norms, limiting individual expression, or if it instead provided a robust framework for female agency and leadership within their prescribed social roles, allowing them to exert significant influence. Did it constrain them, or empower them regardless? Your life as a Viking woman was a constant performance of social status, built on honor, shaped by reputation, and measured by community respect. So, your life as a Viking woman was a constant performance of social status, built on honor, shaped by reputation, and measured by community respect. But even with all your domestic power and social standing, the very nature of Viking society, with its emphasis on raiding and expansion, meant you might face terrifying and brutal realities, violence and raids home defense, captured women's fates. Forget peaceful isolation. The same forces that brought wealth and renown to Viking men could bring terror and devastation to women, leaving you vulnerable to attack, displacement, and a horrifying loss of autonomy. Imagine the sudden, piercing shriek of a raid horn, shattering the morning calm. This was the terrifying reality of violence and raids that could descend upon your home at any moment. While Viking men embarked on voyages of conquest, their own settlements were not immune to attack, either from rival Norse factions or from other peoples seeking revenge or plunder. You were not just a homemaker. You were a potential target. Living in a world where conflict was an ever-present shadow. It's like living in a beautiful, remote cabin. But every once in a while, a heavily armed biker gang decides to swing by and take everything, when your men were away on distant expeditions. The burden of home defense often fell to the remaining inhabitants, including women, the elderly, and children. While not trained warriors like the Shield Maidens remember them from the sagas, you might have to participate in defending your longhouse or farm against smaller raiding parties. Imagine gripping a simple axe or a heavy stick, standing alongside your neighbors, ready to protect your children and your home from intruders, feeling the raw, desperate fear of an impending attack. This was a grim necessity, born of a harsh, dangerous world. Even more terrifying were the captured women's fates. When a settlement was sacked, women were often taken as spoils of war. Their fates could vary, but none were good forced marriage. Concubinage, or most commonly, enslavement known as thrall in Norse society. Imagine being dragged from your burning home, separated from your children, and forced onto a longship, knowing that your life as a free woman was over, and your future was one of servitude in a foreign land. This was a common and brutal reality of the Viking Age. A grim consequence of their own raiding culture, the psychological toll of living under such a constant threat of violence and raids was immense. Every distant sail, every unfamiliar horseman on the horizon, could spark terror. The stories of captured women, often whispered warnings, served as a stark reminder of the precariousness of life and the inherent dangers of the era. This dark side of Viking expansion highlights the profound vulnerability of women in a period defined by conflict, revealing the stark contrast between the power wielded by some Viking women and the utter powerlessness experienced by others caught in the throes of warfare. One mainstream historical fact that powerfully illustrates these realities is the archaeological evidence of fortified Viking Age settlements and the discovery of mass graves with signs of violent death. Alongside historical accounts from Anglo-Saxon and Frankish chronicles detailing the enslavement of women and children during Viking raids, a particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some Viking longhouses, particularly in more exposed areas, were reportedly built with surprisingly narrow, reinforced doors and small, high windows, not just for warmth, but as rudimentary defensive measures, making it harder for small raiding parties to force entry. Imagine your front door being more like a bunker entrance than a welcoming portal. It certainly highlights the constant awareness of danger. Historians still argue whether the extreme violence and threat of capture primarily solidified a woman's role as guardian of the domestic sphere, focusing on internal resilience, or if it instead paradoxically fostered a more adaptable and resourceful female population, prepared to defend their homes and families when necessary. Did it make them more homebound, or just more hardened? Regardless, your life as a Viking woman was shadowed by the ever-present threat of violence and raids, forcing you into grim acts of home defense, and always aware of the horrifying captured women's fates. So, your life as a Viking woman was shadowed by the ever-present threat of violence and raids, forcing you into grim acts of home defense, and always aware of the horrifying captured women's fates. But within the household, especially for wealthier families. Another dimension of your authority emerged: overseeing slaves' labor management, household authority. Forget doing all the chores yourself. For many women, managing a workforce of enslaved individuals was a fundamental part of their daily life, granting them significant power and responsibility within their domestic domain. Imagine waking up, not to the need to start the fire yourself, but to the sounds of others already at work. This was the reality of overseeing slaves for many Viking women. Slavery or thraldom was an integral part of Viking society. Fueled by raids and trade, remember those captured women from the previous section, for those households fortunate enough to own thralls. The mistress of the house, the husfreyja, was typically responsible for their daily management and allocation of tasks. You were not just a domestic worker, you were a manager, a taskmaster, and often the direct authority over other human beings. It's like being the head of a busy household today, but your entire staff is made up of unwilling, uncompensated, and often foreign laborers. Your role involved extensive labor management. You would assign daily chores to your enslaved household members: grinding grain, fetching water, tending animals, cleaning, weaving, and performing various other manual tasks. You'd need to ensure they were fed, clothed, albeit minimally, and housed. As their labor was vital to the functioning of your household and farm, Imagine delegating the arduous task of hand grinding flour to a thrall or supervising a group of enslaved women as they spun wool, knowing that their efficient labor directly freed up your own time for other, perhaps more prestigious tasks like managing trade or crafting jewelry. It's enough to make you long for a simple life where your biggest managerial task is just organizing your sock drawer. This gave you immense household authority within your domain, while your husband might be the legal head of the family. Your direct control over the daily routines and labor of the thralls solidified your position as the undisputed mistress of the home. You were responsible for discipline, welfare to a degree, and ensuring that the thralls contributed effectively to the household's productivity. Imagine making a decision about where the thralls would sleep, what they would eat, or how their tasks would be divided. Knowing that your word was absolute law within your domestic sphere. This was a direct, tangible form of power, allowing you to run your household much more efficiently than a family without enslaved labor. The presence of thralls allowed wealthier Viking women to focus on more complex tasks or to have more leisure time, cementing their higher social status. While the treatment of thralls varied, their existence was a stark reminder of the harsh realities and hierarchies of Viking society. This role in overseeing slaves highlights the complex social structures within Viking society and the significant managerial power that elite women could wield, shaping the daily lives of those beneath them in the social hierarchy. One mainstream historical fact that powerfully illustrates this practice is the archaeological discovery of slave rings iron collars found in some Viking-age settlement sites and graves, alongside literary evidence from sagas and legal texts that frequently mention thralls as a common form of property and labor. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some Viking mistresses, in an attempt to make their thralls more productive or perhaps just to exert control, would reportedly implement a crude reward and punishment system, sometimes offering small, coveted trinkets or extra food for good work, or meting out harsh physical punishments for laziness or disobedience. Creating a primitive motivational scheme. Imagine trying to incentivize your workforce with a shiny pebble. It certainly highlights the basic, often brutal, nature of their management. Historians still argue whether the management of thralls by Viking women primarily contributed to the perpetuation of a brutal system of human bondage, reinforcing social inequality, or if it was simply a pragmatic necessity for managing large households in an agrarian economy. Allowing the household to thrive and thus supporting the family unit, did it entrench injustice? Or was it just practical regardless? Your life as a Viking woman, particularly in a prosperous household, would involve the significant responsibility of overseeing slaves, engaging in complex labor management, and wielding considerable household authority. So, your life as a Viking woman, particularly in a prosperous household, would involve the significant responsibility of overseeing slaves, engaging in complex labor management, and wielding considerable household authority. But for some, the boundaries of their world extended far beyond the longhouse and the farm. Embracing the vastness of the sea and the allure of new horizons travel and exploration new lands. Settlement life. Forget being confined to a single fjord. Many Viking women actively participated in the great age of Norse expansion, journeying to unknown shores, carving out new lives, and becoming crucial founders of distant settlements. Imagine the vast, open ocean stretching before you, the salty spray on your face, as your longship cuts through the waves. This was the adventurous, yet incredibly perilous, reality of travel and exploration for many Viking women. While the sagas often focus on male explorers and warriors, women were undeniably present on these voyages, not as mere passive passengers, but as vital contributors to the success of colonization efforts. You were not just a settler, you were a pioneer, a co-founder of new societies in uncharted territories. It's like being part of the first mission to Mars, but your spaceship is a wooden boat, and your destination might have angry polar bears instead of aliens. These epic journeys took you to new lands from the British Isles and Francia to Iceland, Greenland, and even the shores of North America, Vinland. These were not pleasure cruises, they were arduous, dangerous expeditions fraught with storms, disease, and the constant threat of starvation. Imagine weeks or months at sea, huddled in the open boat, enduring freezing winds and relentless waves, with only the stars and sun to guide your way. Knowing that failure meant a watery grave, it's enough to make you wish for a simple cruise ship, or perhaps just a very strong anti-seasickness pill. Upon reaching these new lands, your work as a woman truly began in establishing settlement life. While men might clear land and build structures, women were instrumental in making the new place habitable, setting up the household. Establishing new food production. Remember all that farm work, now in a completely new environment, raising children again, in incredibly harsh conditions, and creating the social fabric of the nascent community. Imagine arriving on a cold, desolate shore, with nothing but the supplies you brought, and immediately having to start building a new life from scratch. Adapting your skills to unfamiliar landscapes and resources, your resilience, adaptability, and industriousness were absolutely crucial for the survival and flourishing of these new Viking outposts. Without the women, there would be no sustained colonization, no next generation, and no long-term success. You were the anchor that held the new society together, ensuring continuity and growth. This active participation in travel and exploration demonstrates the remarkable courage and vital role of Viking women in shaping the historical expansion of the Norse world, proving that their influence extended far beyond the confines of their ancestral homes. One mainstream historical fact that powerfully illustrates this role is the archaeological evidence of female burials and domestic artifacts found at Viking-age settlement sites in places like Greenland and Lonso Meadows in Newfoundland. Canada. Confirming the presence and crucial role of women in these distant colonial outposts. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some Viking women embarking on long voyages would reportedly carry small pouches of soil from their homeland. Not just as a sentimental keepsake, but with the belief that sprinkling it on newly settled land would help claim it and ensure fertility and good harvests. Essentially bringing a piece of their spiritual home to the new world. Imagine carrying a baggie of dirt across an entire ocean just for good luck. It certainly highlights their deep connection to the land and their hopes for new beginnings. Historians still argue whether the participation of Viking women in long-distance travel and settlement primarily indicates a radical equality and adventurous spirit within Norse society, challenging traditional gender norms, or if it was a practical necessity driven by the requirements of establishing viable new communities in remote locations, where every capable hand was needed regardless of gender. Did it show a truly egalitarian spirit, or just pragmatism regardless? Your life as a Viking woman could lead you on incredible journeys of travel and exploration, to forge new lands, and to establish the very foundation of settlement life. Now, let the chill of the longhouse fade from your skin. The smell of wood smoke and sheep recede, and the distant echoes of raiding horns gently dissipate. The heavy loom lifts from your shoulders. The gnawing anxiety over a child's fever quiets, and the terrifying fear of a storm at sea melts away into a blurring memory. There's no more need to spin thread, no more worrying about meager harvests, and no more struggle to defend your home. Just the soft hum of your fan, the gentle warmth of your blanket, and the profound quiet of your room. You can release the imagined burdens of that incredibly tough, yet remarkably influential Viking woman's life, the constant labor, the profound losses, and the surprising realities of a world so profoundly different from our own. That grim, fascinating, yet undeniably harsh ancient world of Norse women belongs to history, not to your peaceful present. Drift now into a deep, untroubled rest. Sweet dreams. End of script. Sweet dreams.